A middle-aged woman in a wheelchair stopped before the glass doors of the upscale restaurant. The security guard raised his palm. "Sorry, we don't serve." His eyes swept over the wheelchair with visible disdain. From behind, a man in a wrinkled dress shirt stepped forward, his 7-year-old son clutching his hand. He stopped, looked at the woman in the wheelchair, looked at the guard. Then he spoke, voice trembling slightly. "I'll stand right here, until she's allowed inside." The glass doors reflected them all, frozen in the moment before everything changed. 3 hours earlier, the diner on 5th Street smelled like burnt coffee and dish soap. Daniel Ross sat in the corner booth with his son, watching the boy pick at his fries. The plate between them held more food than Daniel had touched. "Dad, why aren't you eating?" Daniel looked up. His son's name was Tyler, and he had his mother's eyes, brown and too perceptive for 7 years old. "I'm full, buddy." It was a lie. Daniel had skipped lunch. The engine job at Morrison's garage had run long, and by the time he clocked out, his stomach had stopped complaining. He'd learned that trick 2 years ago after Claire died. Hunger was just another feeling you could ignore if you tried hard enough. Tyler didn't push. He just slid half his fries across the table. Daniel smiled. "You eat them. Growing boy needs his fuel." The waitress came by with the check, $12.40. Daniel left 13, folding the bills with care. On the way out, something caught his eye near the door. A wallet, black leather, lying half-hidden beneath the coat rack. He picked it up. Flipped it open. Driver's license, 3 credit cards, and nearly $200 in cash. The name on the license read, Marcus Webb. Tyler tugged his sleeve. "Dad, we're gonna be late." Daniel glanced at the door, then back at the wallet. The owner could be blocks away by now. He walked to the counter, handed it to the waitress. "Someone left this. Can you keep it here in case they come back?" She took it without looking up. "Sure." Outside, the autumn air bit cold. Tyler pulled his jacket tighter. "Dad, tomorrow's the parent meeting at school. Can you come?" Daniel's chest tightened. The parent meeting. He'd forgotten. Again. What time? 3:30. He calculated in his head. If he left the garage early, if Morrison didn't need him for the brake job, if traffic cooperated. "I'll be there," Daniel said. Tyler's face lit up. That look was worth every risk. The next afternoon, Daniel kept his promise. He left work at 3, drove straight to the school, and sat in a classroom chair too small for his frame. The teacher talked about fractions and reading levels. Tyler kept glancing over, grinning like his father had just won the lottery. Afterward, in the parking lot, Tyler asked the question that changed everything. "Dad, can we go somewhere nice? Just this once?" Daniel looked at his son. The boy never asked for anything. Not toys, not games, not trips to the arcade. But today, after seeing his father show up when most didn't, Tyler wanted something more. "Where do you want to go?" "That place on Maple, with the big windows." The restaurant. Daniel had driven past it 100 times. White tablecloths, chandeliers visible from the street, valet parking. The kind of place Claire used to talk about before the medical bills came. "That's expensive, bud." "I know." Tyler's voice was small. "But maybe just once?" Daniel thought about the $73 in his wallet. $73 that was supposed to last until Friday. But Tyler's hopeful face, the way he'd been so patient through everything, the hospital visits, the funeral, the nights when Daniel couldn't stop staring at the wall. "All right, let's do it." They arrived just before 5. The restaurant sat on the corner like a glass cathedral, light pouring from every window. Daniel parked 2 blocks away to avoid the valet fee. Tyler practically skipped down the sidewalk, but as they approached the entrance, Daniel's steps slowed. A woman sat in a wheelchair near the doors, mid-40s, dark hair pulled back, wearing a navy blouse and simple slacks. Her hands rested in her lap, and her face held the kind of stillness that came from years of practice. The security guard stood in front of her, not beside her. In front of her. "I'm sorry, ma'am. We can't accommodate wheelchairs tonight. We're fully booked, and the aisles—" The woman, her name was Rebecca, though Daniel didn't know that yet, didn't raise her voice. I called ahead. I was told there wouldn't be an issue. "Well, there is." The guard's tone was flat, rehearsed. "It's a liability. Other guests might be inconvenienced." Daniel stopped walking. Tyler's hand tightened around his. Rebecca didn't argue. She just turned her wheelchair around, the movement slow and deliberate. Her face remained calm, but Daniel saw it, the slight tremble in her jaw. The way her eyes glistened for half a second before she blinked it away. She'd been refused before, many times. The guard stepped back inside, his job done. Tyler whispered, "Dad, why won't they let her in?" Daniel didn't have an answer. Or rather, he had too many, and none of them were good enough to say out loud. Rebecca began rolling toward the sidewalk. In 30 seconds, she'd be gone. The restaurant would open its doors for Daniel and Tyler. The host would smile. They'd be seated by the window, and Daniel would spend the entire meal thinking about the woman who wasn't allowed inside. He thought about Claire, how in her last weeks she couldn't walk without help, how people looked away in the hospital corridors, uncomfortable with her weakness, her need. He thought about Tyler, watching. Then Daniel made a choice. He let go of his son's hand and walked toward the entrance, not inside, in front of the doors, blocking them. The guard noticed first. "Sir, you need to move." Daniel didn't move. He looked at Rebecca, who had stopped rolling and was now watching him with wary confusion. "I'd like to speak to the manager," Daniel said. "About what?" "About why she's not allowed in." The guard's expression shifted, annoyance mixed with disbelief. "This isn't your business. I'm making it my business." Tyler stepped up beside his father, small, thin, but there. The guard pulled out his radio. "We've got a situation at the front entrance." Within a minute, the manager appeared. 50-something, suit pressed sharp, smile professionally strained. His name tag read, Gordon. "Gentlemen, is there a problem?" Daniel kept his voice steady. "Yes. You refused service to that woman because of her wheelchair." Gordon's smile didn't waver. "Sir, I understand your concern, but this is a matter of operational logistics. Our dining room layout isn't designed for what? For people who can't walk? For accessibility accommodations at full capacity. You're not at full capacity. I can see empty tables from here." Gordon's smile finally cracked. "Sir, this is a private establishment. We reserve the right to refuse service when it impacts other guests' experiences." Daniel felt heat rising in his chest. "And how exactly does she impact anyone?" "Wheelchair accessibility requires clearing pathways, repositioning furniture, then reposition it." Gordon's eyes narrowed. "I don't think you understand the practicalities of running a business. And I don't think you understand dignity." The word hung in the air. Gordon straightened. "If you're not here to dine, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Tyler's voice cut through, small but clear. "My dad says we never leave people who need help." Daniel looked down at his son. At 7 years old, Tyler was learning what mattered. Rebecca finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "Please, don't get in trouble because of me." Daniel met her eyes. "It's not trouble. It's the right thing." Gordon motioned to the guard. "Escort them off the property." But before the guard could move, someone in the growing crowd of onlookers lifted a phone. The camera light blinked red. The moment was being recorded. The video went live at 6:47 that evening. By 9, it had been shared 4,000 times. Daniel didn't know that yet. He sat at the kitchen table while Tyler finished his homework, the evening stretching quiet and ordinary. They'd left the restaurant without eating. Rebecca had thanked him, her voice careful and measured, before rolling away down the sidewalk. Daniel had taken Tyler to the diner on 5th Street instead, where nobody cared who sat where. His phone buzzed, a text from his coworker, Jimmy. "Dude, you're all over Facebook." Daniel opened the app. The video was grainy but clear enough, him standing in front of the restaurant doors. The manager's face twisted in irritation. Tyler's small voice. "My dad says we never leave people who need help." The caption read, "Single father stands up to discrimination. This is what courage looks like." 3,000 comments. Half of them praising, half of them dissecting every frame. Daniel set the phone down. His hands felt cold. Tyler looked up from his math worksheet. "Dad, are you okay?" "Yeah, buddy, just tired." But tired wasn't the right word. Exposed was closer. The call came the next morning at 7:15. Daniel was pouring cereal for Tyler when his phone lit up with Morrison's number. "Daniel, it's Pete." Pete Morrison owned the garage. He was a decent man who paid on time and didn't ask too many questions. Daniel had worked for him for 3 years. "Hey, Pete, I'm heading in at 8. "That's what I'm calling about." Pete's voice sounded strained. "I need you to take a few days off." Daniel stopped pouring. Cereal clattered into the bowl. "What?" "That video. The one from last night. It's everywhere, and some of our clients are— Look, I'm not saying you did anything wrong, but Mrs. Hendricks called this morning. Said she doesn't want someone who causes trouble working on her car." "I didn't cause trouble. I stood up for someone." "I know. But Mrs. Hendricks is a regular, and she's got friends. I can't afford to lose business right now." Daniel gripped the phone tighter. "So you're firing me?" "I'm asking you to take some time off. Let this blow over." "How much time?" Pete didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was quieter. "I don't know, Daniel. I'm sorry." The line went dead. Daniel stood in the kitchen, phone still pressed to his ear. Tyler watched him from the table, spoon halfway to his mouth. "Dad?" Daniel forced a smile. "Finish your breakfast. You'll be late for school." By noon, the video had 15,000 shares. By evening, 30,000. The comment section had become a battlefield. Finally, someone with a spine. "This is staged. No way this is real. He's just doing it for attention. Probably getting paid. Or maybe he's just a decent human being." Daniel watched the numbers climb from his couch, the apartment too quiet now that Tyler was at school. The rent was due in 12 days. He had $73 in his wallet and maybe $200 in the bank. No job. No backup. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. "Hello? Is this Daniel Ross?" A woman's voice, smooth and professional. "Who's asking?" "My name is Olivia Grant. I'm a reporter with Channel 7. I'd love to talk to you about what happened yesterday." "I'm not interested." "It would only take a few minutes. People want to hear your side of the story." "There's no story." "I did what anyone should have done." Olivia's tone softened, like she was talking to a child. "Mr. Ross, the video has nearly 50,000 views. People are calling you a hero. Don't you want to set the record straight?" "There's nothing to set straight." He hung up. 3 more reporters called within the hour. Daniel stopped answering. The knock came just after 3. Daniel opened the door to find Rebecca standing there, sitting there, in her wheelchair. She wore a gray sweater and jeans, her expression somewhere between apologetic and resolute. "I'm sorry to show up like this," she said. "I got your address from the video comments. Someone recognized your truck." Daniel stepped aside. "Come in." She rolled into the small living room, glancing around at the worn furniture and the stack of bills on the coffee table. She didn't comment on any of it. "I wanted to thank you," Rebecca said, "and to apologize." "You don't need to apologize." "I do." Because of me, you lost your job. Daniel sat on the edge of the couch. That's not your fault. It feels like it is. She reached into the bag hanging from her wheelchair and pulled out an envelope. I know you probably don't want this, but I'd like to help. To cover what you lost. Daniel looked at the envelope, but didn't take it. I didn't do it for money. I know. Rebecca's voice was steady, but her eyes held something fragile. But the world doesn't usually reward people for being decent. Let me at least try to balance the scales. Daniel shook his head. I appreciate it, but I can't. Rebecca set the envelope on the coffee table anyway. Then keep it there, in case you change your mind. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Rebecca looked at the photos on the wall. Daniel and Tyler at the park. Daniel and a woman with kind eyes holding a newborn. Your wife? Rebecca asked. Yeah. Claire. She died 2 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. Daniel nodded. He'd heard those words so many times they'd lost meaning, but somehow, from Rebecca, they felt different. Like she actually understood what sorry meant. The accident that put me in this chair happened 3 years ago, Rebecca said. Car crash. Drunk driver ran a red light. I was a CEO before that. Real estate development. Built half the commercial buildings downtown. Daniel looked at her more carefully. I didn't know. Most people don't. After the accident, my husband left. Said he couldn't handle it. My friends stopped calling. They didn't know what to say. So they said nothing. She looked down at her hands. I still have money. More than I'll ever need. But I lost everything that mattered. Why are you telling me this? Rebecca met his eyes. Because when you stood in front of those doors yesterday, you reminded me that maybe not everyone is like that. Maybe some people still see me as a person, not just a problem. Daniel didn't know what to say to that, so he just nodded. Rebecca turned her wheelchair toward the door. If you need anything at all, please call me. I owe you more than an envelope full of cash. After she left, Daniel sat alone in the quiet apartment. The envelope remained on the table, untouched. The article appeared 2 days later. Daniel was scrolling through his phone, looking for jobs, when Jimmy sent him the link. The headline made his stomach drop. Unemployed, father exploits, disabled woman for viral fame. Sources say he accepted payoff. The story was vicious. It claimed Daniel had staged the confrontation, that Rebecca was in on it, that the envelope of cash was proof of a secret deal. Anonymous sources. Leaked details. Speculation dressed up as fact. The comment section exploded. I knew it was fake. People will do anything for attention these days. What a scumbag, using a disabled woman like that. Daniel read every word, feeling something cold settle in his chest. The article didn't mention that he'd refused the money. It didn't mention that he'd lost his job. It didn't mention Tyler, standing beside him, learning what it meant to do the right thing. It only mentioned the parts that made a good story. His phone rang, another unknown number. He answered without thinking. Daniel Ross? Yeah. This is Principal Caldwell from Riverside Elementary. I need you to come in tomorrow morning. We need to discuss Tyler's situation. Daniel's throat tightened. What situation? Some parents have raised concerns. It would be better to discuss this in person. The call ended. Daniel sat in the dark living room, staring at the wall. Tyler was at a friend's house for a playdate, blissfully unaware. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. The world kept turning, indifferent to whether you were right or wrong. His phone buzzed one more time, a text from an unknown number. Meet me tomorrow. 2 p.m., corner of 5th and Main. I have proof. Daniel stared at the message. Proof of what? That he was innocent? That the article was a lie? Or proof that everything was worse than he thought? The meeting at Tyler's school was worse than Daniel expected. Principal Caldwell sat across from him in her office, hands folded on the desk. She was in her 50s, gray hair pulled back, expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Ross, I want to be clear that we support you, but several parents have expressed concern about the recent publicity." Concern about what? About whether it's appropriate for Tyler to remain in an environment where other students are being exposed to. She hesitated. Controversy. Daniel leaned forward. "My son didn't do anything wrong. Neither did I." "I understand. But some parents feel differently. There have been complaints. Some students have been teasing Tyler. So punish the kids who are teasing him. Don't punish my son for having a father who stood up for someone." Caldwell's expression softened slightly. "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm trying to navigate a difficult situation. Perhaps it would be best if Tyler stayed home for a few days, just until things settle." "You're asking me to pull my kid out of school because other people are judgmental?" "I'm asking you to consider what's best for Tyler." Daniel stood. What's best for Tyler is learning that doing the right thing matters, even when it costs you. He walked out before Caldwell could respond. At 2 p.m., Daniel stood on the corner of 5th and Main. The city moved around him, cars honking, people rushing past, the world indifferent. A man approached. Mid-30s, suit jacket, leather briefcase. He extended his hand. "Daniel Ross, I'm Victor Hayes. I'm Rebecca's attorney." Daniel shook his hand warily. "What's this about?" Victor pulled a folder from his briefcase. "I've been looking into the article that was published, the one claiming you exploited Rebecca for money. And? It's fabricated. The journalist who wrote it was paid by Gordon Enterprises, the company that owns the restaurant. They're trying to bury the story before it damages their upcoming IPO." Daniel took the folder. Inside were bank statements, email chains, contracts, proof. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because Rebecca wants to fight back. But to do that, she'd have to go public, reveal who she really is, and she's not sure she's ready for that." Daniel looked at the documents. "What does she need me to do?" "Nothing. She just wanted you to know the truth, that you're not crazy, that you didn't imagine this." Victor closed his briefcase. "If we pursue this legally, it'll be a long fight. Expensive. Public. Rebecca can afford it, but it'll cost her privacy. She'll be back in the spotlight she spent 3 years avoiding. And if you don't fight, then the lie stands. You stay the villain, and Gordon walks away clean." Daniel handed the folder back. "Tell Rebecca I don't need her to fight for me." Victor frowned. "You're just going to let them win?" "I'm going to take care of my son. That's all I can do right now." Victor studied him for a long moment. Then he nodded. "I'll tell her." That night, Tyler ran a fever. By morning, it had climbed to 103 degrees. Daniel carried him to the car, drove to the emergency room, filled out forms with shaking hands. The nurse checked Tyler's vitals. "Looks like flu. We'll get him started on fluids." "How much will this cost?" The nurse glanced at her screen. "With your insurance, I don't have insurance right now." Her expression shifted, sympathetic but helpless. "Then you're looking at around $800, maybe more, depending on tests." Daniel felt the floor tilt beneath him. $800. He had $216 in the bank. He sat beside Tyler's bed, watching his son sleep, hooked up to an IV. The boy's face was pale, sweat dampening his hair. He looked so small. Daniel put his head in his hands. He'd done the right thing. He'd stood up for someone who needed help. And now his son was sick. He had no job, no insurance, no way to pay for any of this. The right thing was supposed to matter. But sitting in that hospital room, Daniel couldn't feel it mattering at all. Rebecca arrived at the hospital 30 minutes after Daniel texted her the address. He hadn't wanted to. His thumb had hovered over her contact for 20 minutes, pride and desperation wrestling in his chest. But Tyler needed help, and Daniel was out of options. She rolled through the automatic doors, spotted Daniel in the waiting area, and came straight to him. No questions. No judgment. Where is he? Daniel stood. Room 217. They're keeping him overnight for observation. What did they say? Severe flu, dehydration. They want to monitor his fever. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. I can't pay for it. Rebecca looked at him directly. Yes, you can, because I'm paying for it. Rebecca, don't. Her tone was firm but not unkind. You stood in front of a restaurant for me when you had no reason to. Let me stand with you now. Daniel wanted to argue. Every instinct told him to refuse, to find another way, to handle this himself. But Tyler's pale face flashed in his mind, and the words died in his throat. Thank you, he managed. Rebecca wheeled toward the billing desk. Daniel followed. She spoke quietly with the administrator, handed over a credit card, signed forms. Within 10 minutes, it was done. The weight that had been crushing Daniel's chest loosened just enough to breathe. They rode the elevator to the second floor in silence. When they reached Tyler's room, the boy was awake, staring at the TV mounted on the wall. His eyes brightened when he saw his father. Dad, they gave me a popsicle. Daniel smiled despite everything. Yeah? What flavor? Red. Rebecca rolled closer to the bed. Hi, Tyler. I'm Rebecca. Your dad helped me the other day. Tyler studied her. You're the lady from the restaurant. That's right. Why wouldn't they let you in? Rebecca didn't sugarcoat it. Because some people think wheelchairs are inconvenient. They don't want to deal with them. Tyler frowned. That's mean. It is. But your dad wasn't mean. He stood up for me when he didn't have to. Tyler looked at his father with something like pride. My dad does the right thing, even when it's hard. Daniel's throat tightened. He turned away slightly, pretending to adjust the blanket. Rebecca's voice softened. That's a good dad you've got there. I know. That night, after Tyler fell asleep and Rebecca left, Daniel sat alone in the chair beside his son's bed. The hospital hummed with quiet activity, distant footsteps, the beep of monitors, hushed conversations. His phone buzzed. A text from Victor Hayes. Rebecca wants to move forward. She's going public. Press conference tomorrow at noon. She'd like you there. Daniel stared at the message. Going public meant exposing herself to the world again, to the scrutiny and the questions and the cameras. She'd hidden for 3 years, building walls to protect what was left of her life, and now she was willing to tear them down. For him, he texted back, I'll be there. The press conference was held at the downtown Marriott, in a conference room that smelled like stale air and hotel coffee. Reporters filled the seats, cameras lined the back wall, microphones clustered on the table at the front. Rebecca sat behind the table, composed and still. Victor stood beside her. Daniel waited in the back, feeling out of place in his only clean shirt. At exactly noon, Rebecca began. My name is Rebecca Sullivan. Some of you may remember me as the former CEO of Sullivan Properties. 3 years ago, I was in a car accident that left me paralyzed from the waist down. Since then, I've lived a quiet life, away from the public eye. Her voice was steady, each word measured. Last week, I was denied entry to a restaurant because of my wheelchair. The manager claimed it was a matter of logistics, but the truth is simpler. I was refused because my presence was considered inconvenient, uncomfortable. The room was silent except for the soft click of camera shutters. A man I'd never met, Daniel Ross, stood in front of that restaurant and refused to move until I was allowed inside. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know I had money or influence. He just knew it was wrong. Rebecca's gaze swept the room. Afterward, Daniel lost his job. A false article was published claiming he exploited me for money. That article was commissioned by Gordon Enterprises, the corporation that owns the restaurant, in an attempt to bury the story before their stock offering. She slid a folder across the table. Victor stepped forward to distribute copies to the reporters. These documents prove the payments made to the journalist, the emails coordinating the smear campaign, and the internal memos discussing how to contain the situation. The reporters leaned forward, flipping through pages. Murmurs rippled through the room. Rebecca continued, "I'm here today because I refuse to let a good man be destroyed for doing what was right. Daniel Ross stood up for me when no one else would. Now, I'm standing up for him." A reporter in the front row raised her hand. "Ms. Sullivan, what do you want to see happen?" "I want the truth acknowledged. I want Daniel's reputation restored. And I want Gordon Enterprises held accountable for discrimination and defamation." Another reporter called out, "Are you planning legal action?" "Yes. My legal team is filing suit against Gordon Enterprises for both the discriminatory refusal of service and the deliberate smear campaign against Mr. Ross." "What about the restaurant?" Rebecca's expression didn't change. "As of this morning, I purchased the building that houses the restaurant. Their lease has been terminated." The room erupted. Cameras flashed. Questions overlapped. Rebecca raised her hand slightly and the noise subsided. "I'm not doing this out of revenge. I'm doing it because businesses that discriminate don't deserve to thrive. And people who stand up for what's right shouldn't be punished." She looked directly at the camera in the back. "To anyone watching who's ever been told they don't belong, who's ever been made to feel like an inconvenience, you matter. Your dignity matters. And there are still people willing to fight for it." The conference ended. Reporters swarmed. Victor fielded questions while Rebecca wheeled toward the side exit. Daniel met her there. "You didn't have to do all that," he said. Rebecca looked up at him. "Yes, I did. You reminded me what courage looks like. The least I could do was show some myself." The fallout was swift. By evening, the story had gone national. Gordon Enterprises stock dropped 12%. The CEO issued a statement calling the discrimination allegations unfounded and the smear campaign the work of rogue employees. Nobody believed him. 3 days later, the restaurant closed permanently. The manager, Gordon, was fired. 2 executives resigned. Daniel's phone rang constantly. Job offers, interview requests, apologies from people who'd believed the lies. Pete Morrison called. "Daniel, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have let you go. If you want to come back." "Thanks, Pete. But I think I'm going to take a different offer." "Yeah? Where?" "Rebecca's opening a community center. Services for people with disabilities. She needs a mechanic to maintain the fleet of accessible vehicles." Pete was quiet for a moment. "That sounds like a good fit." "Yeah, it does." 1 month later, the center opened. It occupied the building that had once housed the restaurant. Rebecca had gutted the interior, redesigned everything. Ramps instead of stairs, wide doorways, accessible bathrooms, a commercial kitchen that offered job training, a workshop where Daniel kept the vans running. The ribbon-cutting ceremony drew a small crowd. Local officials, disability advocates, families who needed what the center offered. Rebecca spoke briefly, her words simple and direct. "This place exists because someone reminded me that kindness still matters, that standing up for each other isn't optional, it's essential. We built this center to serve people who've been told they don't fit, to prove that everyone belongs." Tyler stood beside Daniel, holding a balloon someone had given him. He tugged his father's sleeve. "Dad, did you really help build this?" Daniel looked around at the bright, open space, at the people moving freely through doorways designed for them, at Rebecca, smiling for the first time since he'd met her. "We all did, buddy, together." 6 months later, Daniel stood in the garage bay, elbow deep in an engine. The van needed new spark plugs and an oil change. The work was steady, satisfying in its simplicity. Tyler ran in, backpack bouncing. "Dad, guess what?" Daniel wiped his hands on a rag. "What?" I got an A on my book report. That's great, bud. What was the book about? It was about people who stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Daniel smiled. Sounds like a good book. The teacher said I should write my next report about you. Daniel crouched down to Tyler's level. You know what? Write it about all the people who helped, about Rebecca and Victor and everyone who believed the truth mattered. Tyler considered this. Can I write about you too? If you want. But just remember, I didn't do anything special. I just did what I hope anyone would do. But not everyone does. Daniel pulled his son into a hug. No, not everyone does. But maybe if we keep trying, more people will. That evening, after Tyler went to bed, Daniel sat on the small balcony of their apartment. The city stretched out below, lights twinkling in the darkness. His phone buzzed, a message from Rebecca. Thank you for coming to the center today. The families appreciate everything you do. Daniel typed back, thank you for giving me a place to do it. A moment later, you gave me something too. You reminded me that hiding isn't the same as healing. Daniel looked at the message for a long time. Then he replied, we all needed reminding. He thought about Claire, about the promises he'd made to her before she died, to take care of Tyler, to teach him right from wrong, to show him that kindness wasn't weakness. He thought about the moment in front of the restaurant, when he'd made a choice that cost him everything, and how, in losing everything, he'd somehow found something more important. The phone buzzed again. Rebecca had sent a photo, the center's community board, covered in thank you notes and drawings from the families they served. In the center was a child's crayon drawing, a stick figure man standing in front of a building, holding hands with a smaller stick figure. The caption read, Heroes help people. Daniel saved the photo. 1 year later, the center was thriving. They'd expanded services, hired more staff, helped hundreds of families. Rebecca had become a vocal advocate for accessibility rights, testifying before city council, pushing for policy changes. Daniel had settled into a rhythm. Work. Tyler. The occasional dinner with Rebecca and her small circle of friends, people who'd stuck around after the accident, the real ones. On the anniversary of the restaurant incident, a local news station asked to do a follow-up story. Daniel almost said no, but Rebecca convinced him. People need to see that doing the right thing doesn't always end badly. Sometimes it ends exactly as it should. So Daniel agreed. The interview was short, filmed at the center. The reporter asked the obvious questions. Do you regret what you did that day? Daniel shook his head. No. Not even a little. What would you say to people who are afraid to speak up? Daniel thought about Tyler, about Claire, about Rebecca, about the moment when everything could have gone differently. I'd say that fear is normal, but letting fear decide for you, that's when you lose yourself. Standing up doesn't mean you're fearless. It just means you chose to act anyway. And was it worth it? Daniel glanced through the window at Tyler, who was playing with other kids in the center's recreation room. The boy was laughing, healthy, surrounded by friends. Yeah, Daniel said quietly. It was worth it. The segment aired that evening. Daniel watched it with Tyler on the couch, the boy curled up beside him with a bowl of popcorn. When it ended, Tyler looked up. Dad, you're famous. Daniel ruffled his son's hair. I'm not famous. I just did something that mattered. That's the same thing. Daniel smiled. No, bud, it's better. 2 years later, Daniel stood in the garage bay, training a new hire, a young veteran who'd lost both legs in Afghanistan. The kid's name was Marcus, and he was sharp, quick to learn, eager to prove himself. So the key is checking the brake fluid first, Daniel explained, pointing to the reservoir. If it's low, you've got a leak somewhere. Could be the lines, could be the calipers. Marcus nodded, taking notes. Got it. Rebecca wheeled in, Carrying 2 cups of coffee, she handed one to Daniel. "How's the new guy doing?" "He's doing great." "Natural mechanic." Marcus grinned. "Thanks, boss." Rebecca smiled. "We're lucky to have you both." After Marcus went back to work, Rebecca and Daniel stood together, watching the activity in the garage. Vans coming and going, people being picked up for appointments, for job interviews, for life. "Do you ever think about that day?" Rebecca asked. "In front of the restaurant?" Daniel took a sip of coffee. "Sometimes. Do you think you'd do it again, knowing everything that would happen?" Daniel didn't hesitate. "Yeah, I would." Rebecca looked at him, her expression soft. "That's why it mattered. Not because you won, but because you would have done it, even if you'd lost." Daniel nodded slowly. She was right. The outcome didn't determine the value of the choice. The choice itself was the point. "Claire would have been proud of you," Rebecca said quietly. Daniel's chest tightened, but not painfully. More like a reminder that love didn't disappear just because someone was gone. "I hope so." That night, Tyler asked a question while Daniel tucked him into bed. "Dad, when I grow up, will I be brave like you?" Daniel sat on the edge of the mattress. "You're already brave, bud. Every single day." "But I didn't do anything big." "Being brave isn't always big. Sometimes it's just getting up when things are hard. Being kind when others aren't. Standing with someone who needs it." Tyler thought about this. "Like you did with Ms. Rebecca?" "Yeah, like that." The boy smiled sleepily. "Okay, I can do that." Daniel kissed his forehead. "I know you can." He turned off the light and stood in the doorway, watching his son drift off. In the dim glow from the hallway, Tyler looked so much like Claire, it made Daniel's heart ache. But it was a good ache, the kind that reminded him why any of it mattered. Sometimes, a single moment changes everything. Not because it's dramatic or heroic, but because it's honest. Because someone chooses to see another person's dignity as more important than their own comfort. Daniel Ross didn't set out to be a hero. He just refused to look away when it would have been easier. And in refusing, he reminded everyone watching that kindness isn't weakness, that standing up doesn't require perfection, that sometimes the smallest act of courage creates ripples that reach farther than anyone imagined. The world didn't change overnight, but one person's life did. And then another. And then another. And maybe that's how the world changes after all, one choice at a time. One person willing to stand when others walk away. Daniel Ross stood. And in standing, he proved that ordinary people are capable of extraordinary grace.